I'm going to copy this link here, and in another page I'm going to change directory documents, apps, Ionic samples, and I'm going to do this git or Ionic start and demo. I'm just going to call it demo, and I'm going to paste in that URL. And it's automatically going to start pulling in all of the core Ionic documents. It's going to build a Cordova structure for you. And in just a few minutes here, it's done. So now I'm going to change directory to that demo. And again, Ionic has lots of really nice functionality where I can tell it to actually start presenting that app to me. I'm going to, let me pick something I'm not going to use here. I'm going to tell it what port I want to run the app on. So I'm saying Ionic serve, port 9700, and then auto reload on port 9701. And boom, I've got an Ionic app running in my browser. You can do that with any CodePen that's based on Ionic. All you've got to do is go to the CodePen site, look for Ionic and their list of templates, and you can just spin up any of those instantly. Okay, so again, that's just that little sample. All right, for our real one, I'm going to start a side menu app. If you're familiar with iOS development, you've got to give your app a name, so I'm doing that here, and I'm telling it who I am, basically, the owner of this. So I'm going to start this. And again, it's going to kick off what it just did a few minutes ago, but this time it's going to start with that template that's called side menu. While it's chugging along, I'm going to do something here. Okay, so I need to change directory into that race demo. And I'm going to serve this on this port here. So again, I want the demo I just templated, I want to demonstrate that here, so I'm pulling it up, and here it is. I'm going to close it out in Safari because I'm going to work in Chrome. So Ionic is serving this app to me, okay? It's just a typical list you might see in an iOS app, but here's the side menu part. It shows how you can easily have a side menu in your app, and you can drag it over, you can toggle it, and if you click on any of these, it instantly closes the side menu and opens up whatever view you've asked it to open. So that's what we're going to base our app on today. We've already got a lot of it already written, okay? So I'm going to open a new project here in WebStorm. And that was race demo. Oops, I made a mistake. Where did I put that thing?
Looks like it's on the root.
Oops, yeah it is. Okay, that's not where I wanted it, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so this is what Ionic just made for me. It made this structure. And give me a second, let me go back to serving that. Okay, so it's created some default files for me that Cordova or PhoneGap will use to actually package up my app and put it into the App Store. But the main thing it's done here is created this WW structure here. It's included some libraries to all the Ionic files. That includes by default Angular. It packages Angular up in a bundle, so you don't have to include Angular manually. Oops. And it's created the templates that you see here. Here's my menu, and you can see here I've got login, search, browse. Well, here that is, login, search, browse. Okay. It's created a few JavaScript files for me. If you're familiar with Angular, then app.js will be quite familiar to you. You're starting an Angular app. It's called Starter. You're including, you're dependency injecting Ionic and some controllers, and then you're running it on the run event here, or the run method. Ionic automatically can detect when your device is ready. If you've developed with iOS before, you know that when the app is actually loaded up and in memory, the OS will fire a device ready event, which means, okay, you've got access to this device now, the app can start running. Well, with Cordova or PhoneGap, you have to wait for that event. Well, Ionic automatically waits for that event, and once it detects the device ready event, it starts doing some stuff. It replaces the default Safari keyboard. It styles the status board differently, things like that. Okay, so that's what's going on there. And then again, with any Angular app, you have routing. I don't know how many of you are familiar with UI router. By default, Ionic ships with what's called ng route. And so if you want to move from one state to the next, you build routes. Ionic uses an addition to that, and it's called UI router. And you don't have routes, you have states, but it's essentially the same thing. The URL changes, and so the view changes to something else. And this is what that's setting up here, the app state. This menu section is that right there. Search would be another view, and there's the template for it. The browse state. So basically it's just producing a list of states that the app can move to. And then you can see that some have controllers, but most of them just have a template. Okay? And then the way the app knows how to start is it uses this URL route provider. If you didn't tell it where to start, then automatically go to playlists. So you can see that here. If I just start the app all over, it goes to playlists. I can change that to anything I want. Let's make it search. So we'll go to search. And now if I restart the app completely, I started on search. So this is really the state manager for the app. Okay. The other thing it does here is it's made some default controllers. An app controller, the playlist controller. So when you're in the playlists and you see these different items on your view, they're defined here. Okay. So now we have a pretty basic Ionic app. Well, let's kill a lot of that. We don't need most of this. We want to keep the menu, but let's call it something else. Let's call it menu. And let's get rid of these clicks here, and we're going to change this to races. And this next one's going to be maps, or map. Okay, and we're going to tell it when somebody taps on these to go to a state. And I'm going to use a command uisref equals app.races. And same thing over here, uisref app.map. And then the rest of these, I just don't need them anymore. I'm just going to kill them. So if we look at our app now, again, it live reloaded, and there's those things. But let me pull this over. You're going to see some here. If I click on races, I get an error. It's because I don't have a view or a state named races, so it can't go to it. So I've got to fix that. Okay. A couple of things I want to do here. I'm going to add in a bunch of files. I'll explain those in a few minutes. Desktop. Sorry, this wasn't where I expected it to be, so I'm not quite prepared. So I'm going to just blow out the library folder. And again, the library holds all the Ionic stuff and the Angular stuff, and I'm going to blow it out and just put in some new stuff that I want in there. Okay. The app's going to reload still. It'll work just fine. Okay. So what I've done there, and now I need to, now that I have access to that new stuff, I'm going to copy code from another app here, just so I don't have to type all this. And I'll explain to you what I've done there. Okay. Here, Ionic Bundle gets included. Ionic Bundle includes Angular. I'm also telling it to include Firebase and Angular Fire. Firebase comes with a library. And you can use it just as regular JavaScript client, or you can use JavaScript client plus Angular Fire. The nice thing about Angular Fire is it automatically knows how to deal with dirty checking. Okay, so if on your app you have something that says hello, and on the back end somebody changes it to goodbye, well, if you're writing a typical Angular app, you have to listen for some change, and then you have to apply it to the scope. Well, Angular Fire does all that for you. You don't have to deal with safe apply or digest or anything. It's just done. So that's what Angular Fire does. It's really handy for most things. Some things I just don't like it, in which case I use just the regular Firebase capability. Okay, I'm also including Leaflet.js and Angular Leaflet. If you're not familiar with that, it's a mapping client for Angular apps. I'm also including ng Cordova, which is a plugin capability that Ionic can import, Lodash, and I'm telling it to use some different controllers and stuff. They don't exist yet. So as you can see, I'm getting errors that those things aren't there. That's okay. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to import my map file here. And let's see here, maps. Okay, so in my templates, I'm going to create a new file. And it's going to be map.html. Okay, and all this is a view. Okay, as we said, Ionic deals with states, and those states give you a view. And here I'm telling it this is a view, and this is the content of the view. It's got nav buttons, and by default, because the higher portion of the app has a nav bar on it, this part right here, the nav bar, it's going to be able to put buttons on that nav bar, an add button or a menu button, that type of thing, or a back button even. Okay, and then in the content section, the actual viewable, scrollable area of the app, I'm telling it to inject this directive, it's called Leaflet, and that's going to produce maps for me. Okay, so let's see what we get now. I'm going to go to map, but I don't have a state called map, so I need to fix that. And I'm going to come over here to, I'm going to replace this. I'm going to say map, and map, and map. Okay, so I've created a state called map, and it's got a template called map. And now if I go to maps, let's see here. Yeah. I'm going to just make map my default state. And ta-da, I have a map. Okay, but it doesn't show anything. Again, these were the buttons I was talking about. I've got this little locator button and the menu button. All right, so let's do some more stuff with our map. First, Leaflet needs some specific styling, so I'm going to include that in my CSS. So this is the styling for the Leaflet plugin. All right, and I've got a few more styles I want to use. And let's see if things get any better. Yeah, still nothing, but we'll get there. All right, now I need to tell my map that there's going to be a controller. So I'm going to, just like you would with any Ionic or any Angular app, you just tell it where the controller is. Map controller. Okay, and I'm going to get an error. I don't have a map controller, so let me get that in there. And in here, I'm going to create a directory called controllers. And in that controllers, I'm going to create a new one. And should be a little bit better, except now I'm getting a warning about I don't have Cordova geolocation in there. So in my app.js, you know, I'm familiar with this, I need to tell it that I'm going to dependency inject these things. So let me get this back over here. I should be a little better off. And I still have a race details provider. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stop typing any of this, and I'm just going to plug this stuff right in, and then we'll talk about it. So you see the process of modifying what I started with to get to where I want to go. And I'm getting a little somewhere, but I got some problem. You know what, guys, what I'm going to do? My live coding is going downhill there. So I'm just going to give up on live coding and just show you the actual stuff. Fortunately, I've already got it here, so let me kill what I was serving there. I'm going to change directory to documents, apps, and examples, and what is this one called? Race demo guide. There we go. And I'm going to copy that. Okay, so there it is. Let me change here. Okay, so I've already got this app made, and this is what it looks like. So if I start the app up, if you notice there's a bit of a flash, okay? The view comes up, and then boom, I see AngularJS 5K. And what that's doing is it's displaying the view, and then after the view's loaded, it's going to Firebase and it's getting the data I was looking for. And I can click on here, and now I've got the details for this race I've created. It's going to start today. We're starting in a few minutes. You didn't know you were going to run a 5K today, but you are. And here's all of you in here from Meetup. Everybody that signed up by about 4:30 or so. Everybody that came on. Okay, but let's start from here. Again, building an MVP app. You just want to make it quickly, get something out to the customer or your client so they can see how it's going to look and feel and iterate quickly on it. So I can open up an app or a modal here, and we'll create a new race called example, and I can arrow up through the dates, the time, I can change the distance, and all of this looks like a standard app, and I can create the race, and now I have a new race. Okay. The nice thing about Ionic is all of the things that users expect on an iOS or Android app are already there. I just drag this over, and I have those edit buttons that we're all used to seeing in our contacts list and everything. And I can click on edit, and now I can change it to example race. Okay, and now it's updated. Again, that was changing it on the client, updating it on Firebase, and the client updating instantly, and thousands or millions of clients automatically got that without an HTTP call. Okay, and the other thing here, I can just delete it. Boom. Again, Ionic's given me a modal. I didn't have to write this modal. Boom, it's gone. Okay, but let's build another race. And now if I go to that race, I've got another option. I can add runners to the race. I hate to show my age there, but I will. Okay, so instantly I've got a runner in the race, and I can create another runner. And Jim, I'm gonna embarrass you a little bit here. I'll be nice. I'll say you're 40.
Not that much older.
Okay, so again, automatically wrote to Firebase, updates all the clients. Well, I can look at my map now finally, and here's where the race is going to take place. I did a little trickery on the back end. I automatically told it where the race is going to be, so you didn't have to do that in the client. But with very little work, I've already got an app that you could use for mapping cars. You know, if you're a taxi company, you can track out all of your cars, where they are at any given time. It looks pretty good. I can scroll through it, and I can zoom into an area. The only thing not working right now is because Cordova updated tonight, and so my plugins aren't working. I should be able to click there and it'll automatically tell me where I'm at, but oh, there we go. It is showing me where I'm at. So the type of functionality I was able to create with very little effort, importing a few libraries, doing a little bit of code changes, and I've got an app that could already do something for a client. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. I need to start a process. Give me just 1 second. Node race processor. All right. I have a little Node.js script running. Let me explain what that is. All right. It's a Node.js script that connects to Firebase. I tell it where my Firebase data is, and then I tell it anytime one of the races changes, evaluate it. Okay? Did the race start? And if it did, manage that race. Okay? So again, Firebase isn't just a front-end capability. You can write Node.js, PHP, anything API you wanted to. Their libraries are all in JavaScript, but if you want to, you can work directly with their API with just typical post, gets, etc. So what this is doing is it's going to check the races, and when I say a race has started, it's automatically going to find all of the contestants, and it's going to simulate them moving, running around the track. So I'll do that here. So I'm going to click on, I'm going to move this over. So watch what's going on here. I'm going to start the race. And now it's showing contestants running over here. It's moving them on the back end. This is a Node.js script running on my laptop, making changes to Firebase, and instantly my iOS client is updating. So here's these people running around. Jim and I are chugging away at it. Let's see who wins. I think I'm going to win.
You're randomizing the distance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. So the back end is automatically updating where these people are, and the front end is instantly getting an update on it.
Let's see if we're going to take a swim.
Jim won. I need to go to the gym some more. Okay. Oops. I'm not sure what that was. So let's get rid of that. My modal didn't close properly. I'm not sure why. I'm not going to solve it today. Okay. So that was an example of that. Okay. Now, I had the app, the view, automatically checking on the status of a race. And if a race was in progress, that changed to stop race, so somebody could choose to stop the race. If the race is finished, I can reset it, and now it's never been run. Say for example, funnily enough, I was speaking to a potential client, and he needed something similar to this. He's got a much better concept on what it's going to be for, but it's basically this app. Now, I wouldn't be showing his trade secret here. There's already several apps that do exactly this on the App Store, and some of them are pretty good. Okay, but I've literally spent 12 hours making this app to present tonight, and most of it was figuring out how to make Leaflet work, because I've never done a Maps app in my life. I've seen examples, but I've never done one. So most of the time it took to actually create this app was figuring out how to make the mapping portion work. And the rest of it demonstrates how quickly you can get a mobile app running and have functionality that a customer could use right away, give feedback, ask for features, and you can plug them into Firebase and Ionic really quickly. So let me give you one more demo of that. Let's see who wins this race. Okay, now this one here, we're using my router Wi-Fi here. I've got it set. Let me show you this part of the script. There's 90 steps along this race. And so for every participant in the race, they're going to get pushed to each one of those 90 steps every some amount of time, between 150 milliseconds and 750 milliseconds. Okay? So I'm going to randomly move people on some interval. Now that's going to update Firebase automatically, instantaneously. Okay? But we've got to deal with network latency. Okay? Shoving it up to Firebase is going to have some latency. Getting it back down to my view is going to have some latency. So what you're going to see is the display is going to, sometimes depending on the quality of my connection, it's going to jitter and it won't be really smooth and the timing's kind of weird, but it works. Let me pull up two windows to do this at the same time. Okay, so again, we got three clients here effectively. We've got this node script, we've got my first browser and my second browser, and they're all getting updates at the same time. So I'm going to click on Start Race on one of them, and the race is on. Oops.
Oops.
There we go. So as you can see, there's lots of dots. There's not 78 or whatever it is. That's because many of us are in the same spot. So these little dots, you can't see them stacked on top of each other. But we're all chugging along there. And as you can see, the back end there is just throwing out updates. There's 78 something people, 90 steps, so it's making a lot of updates. The updates are coming really fast. And you can see these two clients, they're virtually exactly in sync. That's how fast Firebase is. It deals with that network latency problem, and boom, we've got our winner. So let's take a screenshot of that. Okay, so you can see how well that worked with very little code. If you look at the code here, there's, the stuff I did, there's probably 300 lines of code, if that. Okay, let's do one more example. See. Okay, so you've seen it running in a browser. Okay, presumably it's going to work on a phone. So let's do that. So let's do Ionic build. Or actually, we got to do a few things first. Let me install some plugins. Actually, I'm not going to do the plugins because of Cordova's update. But let's do this. Ionic platform. Add iOS. Okay, if you've done any Cordova development, any PhoneGap development, this is basically just a wrapper on Cordova platform add iOS. So I'm telling it to add an iOS app. And I'm also going to do Android. And while that's going, I'm going to start up Genymotion and Xcode. Genymotion is an emulator or a simulator for Android. If you do Android development, you really owe it to yourself to get Genymotion. The stock Android emulator will take 10 minutes to load, let alone actually load an app. Genymotion is just astounding. So I'm going to start a Samsung Galaxy S4, and let's see here. All right, I'm going to now do Ionic run Android. Okay, my machine's a little messed up. I can't run the iOS from the Ionic command line. It's old. I've got so many things, different settings on it, but I can run Android. So you're going to see an Android app open up here in just a second. And while that's going, I'm going to open up. Let's see. Let's do an iPhone 6 Plus.
We want to see it
Of course. All right, so let's see it there. Assuming that's displaying well, good.
We've got big builds to see.
Android's still chugging along. I don't know if I can make that any smaller.
I was going to say, I guess you could probably zoom out.
That's the best I can do. Yeah. Okay, so that's the iPhone 6 Plus. I hope everybody likes it. Let's do this. Let's rotate it. No, I don't have it set for rotation. So,
You could always do a 4.
yeah, let's do something else. We'll do a 5S. That should fit. All right, still waiting on Android. Maybe my screen locked. There we go. All right, my demo's failing on us here. It's not running on Android for some reason. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Okay, so there it is. There's my app running on the iOS simulator. And again, there's that example app, and I can start the race, and boom, there goes my runners. Okay, because I can't screen share my phone right now. It's not working for some reason. It looks exactly the same on the phone. So everything you saw in Chrome looks exactly like you see here. That's how easy it is to get rolling with Ionic, and you could literally, with an iOS developer's license, you could submit this to the App Store tomorrow, and it'd be there in a few days. So it's really quick to get up, and Firebase makes all of that so much easier. If you haven't noticed here, I didn't do a single backend thing. Okay, the extent of building out the backend, I'll show you.
Beat you that time.
Now, I'm lying a little bit. I didn't do anything for this demo. In a real production app, there's some things you got to do, and I'll walk through that. So if I go to dashboard, now let's see. Okay, here's my back end. It's literally just a JSON table structure. Just like you might expect to see in a NoSQL database, that's what Firebase is using. They actually are not using Mongo or Couch or any of those. They have their own proprietary format. And they're running it on a Scala backend. So it's incredibly fast. So here were our races. Okay. You can open them up here and you can see any details about them. And as you saw here, I did this reset race. Well, watch when I reset it. I'll try to switch over quickly. You can see that Firebase is demonstrating that something changed, and then it fades out because it wants you to get to see the change. And if I start the race again, you can see over here that stuff is changing. My contestants are moving. So let's watch this guy. In real time, the database is updating with the changes that my node server is shoving to it. Okay, I put positions in here. There's not enough logic in that for it to be the actual who's the leader, and I didn't have time to display that. But you can see that it's updating. So this whole time that's updating. And another part y'all didn't see is this race stats. For every runner in the race, I'm logging when they got to every single position. Okay? With Firebase, and with most NoSQL data store type services, you want it to be pretty flat. You don't use a relational linking. You put everything in there pretty flat. So you see a lot of code in different, or not code, but data in different places. That just makes it easier to access in the query. So again, all of this was updating instantly without us having to do a single thing. Okay? Some problems with Firebase. Right now, they don't have a very good query mechanism. There's one capability of querying. Okay, say you've got a table full of data, and you only want the ones that are in Plano. Well, that's not going to work out so well. Okay, it's the way they've got the data structure right now. It's hard to query specific things. Okay, they're adding on some functionality to query by specific indexes. They don't have it right now. But a lot of the time, for many apps, you don't really need true querying capability. Because, as you've seen here, don't know what that bug is. That's new. I'm going to blame it on, okay. So these here, if I'm going to look at the example race, I don't need to go querying it because I already know what it is. So I don't go ask, give me the example race. I link to the example race. So a lot of times with apps, you don't necessarily need querying. If you do need querying, Firebase is kind of limiting right now. You can attach Elasticsearch to Firebase, and so you can do all the querying you might want to do. They're coming out with a new query mechanism where you can do it without needing Elasticsearch, but right now they don't. Okay. Some other really nice things about Firebase are authentication. I didn't do any authentication on this app. You should definitely do authentication on your app. Let's see, I'm trying to find the docs. I'm not used to seeing the website on this screen with it small like this. Okay, so user authentication. I can automatically, with just a few bits of code, add in email and password authentication. I put up a login screen, give me your email, give me the password you want, and boom, you're logged in. And create accounts with Firebase instantly, just like that. But the really nice thing is if your app needs social integration, you can tie in Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, and Google, all without having to roll your own authentication system on your own backend. Then, once you have users that are authenticated, right now, anybody that knows that URL right there can start doing anything they want to this data. Okay? In a real production app, you would put in what are called rules. In a LAMP stack or node stack, you would have an API call, you would check the request, you'd check their authorization headers, you would validate every field, and then you'd see if the business logic lets them do that, and then you would finally let the action take place, and then you would send back a response. Firebase doesn't work that way. Firebase's only means of security are what's called rules. Rules are really cool and they're really strange. It's literally a JSON document that says what anybody can or cannot do. Can anybody read this? Can anybody write this? Can only authenticated people read this? Can only people that are called admins read this? Can only people with this email address read this? Okay? Then you can use the same types of authentication rules for who can write to this data. And then in JSON, you tell it, let's see, let me get back up to here. And these are what the rules look like. So for every section of your Firebase, you tell it, you can do this. So foo is a table. Anybody can read to it, nobody can write. Okay? If I'm going to write data for a specific client, well, their user ID, everything will be stored just under their ID. Okay? So everybody else's will be stored under their own individual IDs. And then the only people that can write to this section are the people whose user ID matches their authentication token. Validation's different. Right? Validation is not authentication, but you tell it, okay, foo. If I'm going to write in a field called foo, it must be a string. And it must be a string less than 100 characters. You can do an incredibly complex validation. You can write in here that, okay, is my parent up the chain, is there a field that says writable? And if not, then you can't write below that one. So you can do just about anything you can imagine with Firebase that you can do on a back end, but you don't have to manage that server. You just have to manage a rules table. And they can get quite complex. If you got a very complex application, you can have a whole lot of rules. They have a new language called Blaze that takes programmatic rules and converts them to JSON. I don't really care for it, to be honest. It's not that it's bad or anything, it's just one more thing to learn. I'd rather just write my own rules files. So quite a bit of capability. You could literally show up at a client site. They are going to tell you their requirements for a really basic app, and we're going to grow it into something bigger. And you could literally sit down with one of their UX guys and spin it up for them in a day. And you may not end up using Firebase as the back end, but if you do, you could. But at least right there in front of the client's eyes, they can see live data going into it, and they can see live interaction on the fly. So that's really all I've got. Anybody have questions? Sure.
Can you show a little bit of the code where you're actually talking to Firebase from JavaScript?
Sure, sure. Okay, well, that's kind of funny. I can't.
Oh.
And let me explain why. Okay, so in my races controller, when somebody starts, or when somebody creates a race, let's go here, and they click here. All right, when this modal comes up, I'm giving them a new data object, a new object called race. And it's got these fields here: the start date, start time, the location. This is where I automatically told it where the race was going to be. All right, and then when they save that, let me show that here. When they save the race, all that data was on the scope. And I'm just saying race, save, scope, modal, model. That is the entire interaction with Firebase. Here's an object, save it.
I take it races, though, is the name of the collection, or?
I'm sorry?
Is like races the name of your collection in Firebase? Or?
Yeah, races.
Yeah.
Yep. So in my races collection, I have all the races that have been created. And so here I have saved those. Okay. The node example maybe is a little bit better for demonstrating that. So I'm camping on my Firebase, okay? And when a race starts, well, I'm asking it, okay, here's my Firebase. I'm looking for the races table, and anytime one of the races changes, then check these criteria. Is it started, and has it stopped? Okay, so if it started but has not stopped, then I need to manage this race. And I go through here. I create a few async functions that need to run because everybody's going to run at a different pace. But when a contestant it needs to be moved, here's my interaction with that. I set the contestant's coordinates, and then I do an update. So again, that's the whole extent. I don't do HTTP GET, and there's callbacks on these. So if you set something and then you need to make sure it actually set, you can do that. Or you need to see if it errored out, you can do that. I just didn't do it in this demonstration. So the interaction with Firebase is really terse and simple, unlike dealing with a full service. Anybody else have a question? Yeah.
So recently, I built to kind of get familiar with Angular Fire, I built a note-taking app, and I noticed, like, I used a constant to talk to Firebase with the URL, so I was wondering if there's something that I wanted to build and utilize Angular Fire again, but I wanted to have user logins and I need a lot of security. Is there another way besides on the client side to connect to Firebase with their URL?
There is, and let me show you. Okay, you see here that I told it where my Firebase was. This was on Node. In Angular, what I did is I created a constant. And anywhere in a controller or a service that needs access to know where my Firebase is, I just do a dependency injection of that base ref. Okay.
You don't want that in your code, though, right?
Yeah, I don't
But
want
you
people to see that.
Well, what you could do is, which a lot of people do, is they'll have a JSON file that they'll load at runtime to get that information set to value, and then you do your access.
Yeah. But it's still going to be accessible.
Yeah, it's still going to be accessible,
Yeah.
because we do something similar for like Google Wallet. All the client, stuff for Google Wallet, we read that in
Right.
at runtime. It'll still be there, because as soon as anybody that's smart enough to be able to hit F12 and go to sources or whatever, will be able to set breakpoint, and then they get access to everything in your Angular app. But, so you can't really hide it too much unless what you're gonna do is you're gonna put all that stuff on the back end and basically go through like Justin did. He isn't really going through Node, but you'd have to basically set Node or some other app as your front end. and then you lose the stuff like, you know, you lose a lot of that functionality.
Right. I question the need for that obfuscation. Okay, you could set up an API for your app, and your app could talk to the API, but you're going to have to roll WebSockets yourself if you use them. You're going to have to either roll an API, you know, HTTP GET, posts, updates, etc. And then your API would then talk directly to Firebase. But to be honest, I don't know that that's really necessary. If you look at parse, convey, any of the backends as a service, you put in your client API, and anybody can check that. But just as with your own API, your own API has to be in the app, right? So, you know, xyz.com is going to be accessible to anybody that sees it, and they can hammer away at it with posts and gets and see if they find holes in it. And so one way or the other, a client can query your API. It all comes down to the security. How good is your validation? How good is your authentication? And you're going to have those same questions if you roll your own backend. So far from what I've seen, I've been able to feel confident that I'm not exposing any risk at all. If you look at, like say you did something like convey or parse, they don't necessarily give you a URL like this. They give you a secret or an app key or an app ID or something like that. That app ID is really nothing but a URL, okay? parse.com/myappkey, okay? Well, if you write your own backend, you're showing a URL as well. So it just comes down to how well you secured your backend, and I think you can do that more than adequately with security rules. So I'm using it. 2 years ago when I first saw Parse and Convey and some of the others, I was just like, no way, I'm not putting, and then it dawned on me, you know what, these guys are a lot better at security than I am. And so I'm comfortable with letting them handle the security of the system, and I handle the security of my data.
There is a library that will scramble everything. I think it was JS Scramble or something like that.
There's a few.
But it's rather expensive, but it will take everything, and it's almost like you're doing, you know, base64 type encryption, and then it actually has something that is pulling that out to interpret it and run it. But you can't debug it or anything at that point either. But if you're doing something where you really feel you need that kind of security, that might be something to look into.
Sure. Anyone else?
You AngularJS as a reference in your index file?
Yeah.
It's not in the project.
Correct.
Is
Okay.
that all built up when you build it?
Yeah, you've got to have it in there, and at 404 is when you're running it in the browser. But then PhoneGap or Cordova during the build process injects itself in there.
So how do you run it in the browser if you're just testing it on your laptop?
All that does is you don't have access to native APIs then. So I couldn't get the contacts, and I couldn't get the calendar and stuff like that.
Okay. And the ngcordova.js, is that actually in the library? Is that actually in the file structure?
Yeah, it is.
There's tips.
Oh, did you see it? There you go. If you go to on GitHub, it's ngCordova. I use it for some things, and I don't for others. It's supposed to be an Angular way to interact with Cordova. Unfortunately, like the contacts plugin, for example, it's scaffolded out, but most of the code's not there. But some of the things, camera and calendar, those are all really good. Yes?
You had mentioned that you could use the client with any backend, not even use Firebase backend. So,
Wait. Which client?
the Firebase.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. So that's specific only to Firebase.
It is proprietary to Firebase, and you know, before I'm moving my app onto Firebase, and you might have heard 3-4 months ago there was a company called Go Simple that was a backend as a service, and WebSocket was all wonderful, and then they sent out a notice and said we're shutting down in 2 weeks. Goodbye. And so that's a great risk you've got. You've got that if you use parse or convey or any of the others. The only way to avoid that is to row your own services, but then that really slows down development. I talked to Firebase about that. They're not going to commit to anything, but I talked to several Firebase staff, and they gave me a good enough feeling that they were aware of that concern, and they were scared of what happened to Go Simple as well. I think Simple Go, whatever it was, Go Instant. And while nobody would say anything on record, they made it clear to me that if all else fails, I'm going to not be left without at least being able to roll a Firebase of my own.
Well,
I can't guarantee that they're not going to, but
I think that's the big risk whenever you have any service provider that provides free accounts for people that are doing stuff under what they consider the bottom limit.
Yeah.
Because sooner or later you end up getting top heavy with the free accounts, and you're not doing you're basically spending all your time with that. And so that's the big where you got, like Mongo Labs is a good example. Tons of people use them for anything less than 2 gigabytes they can get away with free.
yeah. And let me show you that. Their pricing is astounding. It's really good. I've got, if you go on my blog, there's another company very similar to Firebase, different in a lot of ways. It's called PubNub, and it's publish subscribe messaging, and it is amazing. I would say it may be even faster than Firebase in broadcasting out data. But they don't have necessarily the same features. They weren't intended as a data store. They were intended as a messaging system. But now they're kind of moving towards a data store system. I was seriously considering using them, but on my blog you'll see there that I did a comparison of PubNub to Firebase pricing. You've got to be monetizing really well to use PubNub, in my opinion. Firebase, the free account, no more than 50 connections. So if you've got an app that's kind of building up speed and now 50 people are simultaneously connecting, then you've got to move on to a paid plan, okay? But 50 max connections, 5 gig data, 100 megabyte of storage. You could do, this demo app, I could sell this on the App Store and have hundreds of customers before I ever reach those limits. Their next step up is the Candle plan. You can see you have 200 concurrent connections, lots of data. And then you got a Bonfire, 750 concurrent connections. You've got to have, it doesn't sound like a lot, but you've got to actually have a pretty damn popular app to have 750 people instantaneously using it. I'd love to be in that situation. And then you go on to Blaze, which gets bigger.
I need something like a Bonfire.
Yeah, and there is a Bonfire, the Inferno plan.
Oh,
there you go.
Yeah, okay.
The Inferno. So for $1,500 a month, you've got to be doing pretty well. And if you've got 10,000 simultaneous connections and you're monetizing even moderately, you're going to be doing all right. You're going to be making a whole lot more than that. Yes?
So once you hit your 10,000 connection, what does it do? Does it just start billing you per connection, or does it stop?
I can't remember. What they do is, at first, if it just happens a little bit, they ignore it. But then if you start consistently getting over the limit, then they contact you and say you need to move up to another plan.
It's like the 95%.
Yeah, yeah. Anyone else? Yes?
How do you handle a cold start if you have no connection, you turn on the app, and then you can't connect?
Okay. Right now, if you're using Angular Fire, Firebase has no offline capability. Okay, so if you're completely 100% using Angular Fire and the app starts up, they don't have an internet connection, your app's going to show no users. Okay, if you're not using Angular Fire, then the newly released version has full offline capability. You can even do a sign up offline. It's pretty cool. And then when the app finally does get online, it will attempt to complete those transactions you've created. It'll attempt to create a sign up. And if it fails, then you've got to handle that as a developer. Not right now, no. Now, I didn't show it too much there. I like Angular Fire for a lot of things, but some things I just prefer to just use the regular. And fortunately, it's written well enough that you could completely do without Angular Fire and still manage most of the things that you see here without too much trouble. So if you had to release the app today and you needed full offline support, then don't use Angular Fire. Just kind of use the regular Firebase API or SDK and manage the live updating stuff yourself, which is literally just listening. It's like setting a scope watch. You set a reference and you say when the you saw it here. So reference on child changed. So you would listen for those events. With Angular Fire, you don't have to. It does that for you. But if you need offline right now, then this is the way to do it.
I've got a question for you, because I'm looking at this, and this looks like it's really good for a community app where everybody wants to know when data changes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like your chat app and stuff like that.
Sure.
But like if I was going to do something where nobody else in this room cares about what I just updated. I mean, how do you actually tell Angular Fire that I only care about stuff that's got my auth ID in it or whatever? I mean, is there a rule that you'd write that says don't tell anybody unless, or don't notify anybody unless the data is associated with their authorization ID? Or
yeah, you just listen on the stuff that you care about. You create references.
Well, I mean, everybody would be interested in the same data.
Sure.
You know, but it may be you're interested in your version of your data. I'm interested in my version of my data. Like, you know, like my Brew Everywhere app, where you don't give a dang about my brewing recipes,
right,
and I don't give a dang about yours.
Sure.
So when you update it, I may not want to see the updates.
And okay, so if I'm in the app.
Let's say I wanted to monitor 5 racers, and he wanted to monitor 5 different racers.
Sure.
Is that what you're basically
saying?
Yeah. So here's a great example of that. Okay. If I click on here, I'm only going to find out about our race.
Right.
And if somebody else clicks on this one, they're only going to find out about that race.
Okay.
So same thing with you. If you're logged in as you, your data will be stored under your ID, and only you can see it. Nobody else can see it, let alone get notified that any of it changed. So it's its own silo if you build it to be its own silo.
So if you build it hierarchically that way,
yeah,
then nobody else will see it because it falls under you. But
correct,
if you wanted to make it available for sharing, well, you might not listen for changes to
correct,
that.
Right. Anyone else? Okay, that's all I got then.